Please be seated. The Honorable Mia Amor-Motley, Prime Minister of Barbados, the Honorable Colin Jordan, Minister of Labour and Parliamentary Representative for St. Peter, Professor Sir Hilary Beckles, Vice Chancellor, University of the West Indies, Sir Paul Altman, Chair, Campus Council, Professor the Most Honorable Udine Barreto, Pro-Vice Chancellor and Principal of the University of the West Indies, Cayfield Campus, Mrs. Julie Arthur, and members of the Arthur family, Professor Clive Landis, Pro-Vice Chancellor for the Board for Undergraduate Studies and Principal Designate, Senator Dr. Romel Springer, Parliamentary Secretary, Ministry of Education, Technological and Vocational Training, members of the campus community, specially invited guests, members of the media, all-night audience, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. My name is Professor Winston Moore, Deputy Principal here at the UWI Cayfield campus, and I will be taking through this morning's proceedings. It's my pleasure to welcome you to this renaming ceremony in honor of the late Professor, the Right Honorable Owen Seymour Arthur, the former Prime Minister of Barbados. We want to say a special welcome to the family of Professor Arthur, who have generously given their support to this project. Thank you. I also want to thank the Prime Minister, the Honorable Mia Amor-Motley, and other members of the House and Senate for joining us today for this ceremony. I know the University of West Indies is considered home, therefore let me say, welcome home. It was my honor to chair numerous lectures and engagements by Professor the Right Honorable Owen Arthur here at the UWI Cayfield campus. I recall his first lecture given in September 2018 after he was named a professor of practice of the University of the West Indies. The lecture on the topic, the IMF and the Caribbean, New Directions for a New Relationship, is of much relevance now as it was then. During the lecture, he spoke about how some small states can utilize the funds available from the IMF after the passage of hurricanes. He also made a very important point that as Barbados headed into its own homegrown structural adjustment program, the issue will not be the reserves or the debt. Our problem will be how to manage a society where the economic pillars of the island were weak. The great challenge will be how do we rebalance the social system with the economic system. As the social system is now too large, given the challenges we have seen in relation to international business and financial services, tourism, manufacturing, as well as agriculture. This challenge, he ended by noting, would engage us in an intellectual exercise, which I know he was very much looking forward to being part of from his office in this building. The story of the late Professor Arthur is quite similar to that of the UWI. Professor Arthur started from very modest beginnings to become Barbados's longest-serving prime minister and one of the great Caribbean leaders. Similarly, the University of the West Indies Caveville campus began at a temporary site near the Deepwater Harbor with just 118 students and has grown into a campus that now boasts over 6,000 students and as part of the UWI ranked as one of the finest universities in the world. His path was also linked to the University of the West Indies in terms of his education, pursuing a Bachelor of Science degree in Economics and History from the Caveville campus of the University of the West Indies, and then a Master of Science degree in Economics from the Mona campus, also started a great tradition of Caribbean prime ministers and leaders educated by the University of the West Indies. With today's naming ceremony, Professor the Right Honorable Owen Arthur will forever be linked with his university. We also honor a man that has served as one of the major forces behind the implementation of the CARICOM single market and economy, and despite his energies in the area of regional integration, he's always had a focus on poverty and the link between the economy and society. He enjoyed teaching. He enjoyed interacting with young scholars. And I'm sure he's smiling at the thought of his name being on this building that will host numerous intellectual discussions in the area of trade, social, and economic development. It's my pleasure now to welcome to the podium our most distinguished and beloved principal, Professor the Most Honorable Udine Barrow, Pro-Vice Chancellor and Principal of the University of West Indies Caveville campus.
Thank you. Master of Ceremonies, Professor Winston Moore, who is also the Deputy Principal of the Caveville campus, the Honorable Mia Amor Motley, Prime Minister of Barbados, the Honorable Colin Jordan, Minister of Labor and Parliamentary Representative for St. Peter, Professor Sir Hilary Beckles, Vice Chancellor of the University of the West Indies, Sir Paul Altman, Chair of Campus Council of the Caveville campus, Mrs. Julie Arthur and members of the Arthur family, Senator Dr. Rommel Springer, Parliamentary Secretary, Ministry of Education, Technological and Vocational Training, members of the campus community, specially invited guests, members of the media, our online audience, ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome. Today is a glorious day. As perhaps my final public act as Pro-Vice Chancellor and Principal of the Caveville campus, I am truly pleased to participate in a ceremony that honors the life and work of an accomplished Barbadian Prime Minister and Caribbean regionalist, the late Right Honorable Professor Owen Seymour Arthur. As I stated last year on his passing, and I quote, "For someone who enjoyed such an exceptional political career, occupying the pinnacle of unbroken political leadership, Professor Arthur embraced his academic life with ease and generosity. Professor Arthur made his professional expertise, incisive mind, and commitment to mentoring the next generation of economic thinkers available to the entire campus community." End of quote. It is only fitting that the University of the West Indies should honor Professor Arthur here at his alma mater, the Kayville campus. It is here his intellectual journey began, and it is here he earned a solid reputation as a student of economics, even before there was a Faculty of Social Sciences, Professor Troy Lord. Professor Arthur went on to fortify that reputation at the University of the West Indies Mona campus in graduate studies, and later as a technocrat and economic policy expert with the Jamaican government. This was before he elevated his stature even further by becoming an astute politician and political tactician, a no-nonsense government leader, often affable in nature, but at times, according to folklore, wielding a sharp tongue with a temper to match. You have heard from Professor Winston Moore the correlation that exists between the UWI Kayville campus and Professor Arthur as symbols of excellence, and the rise of both from modest beginnings to reach positions of eminence on the regional and global stage. These shared achievements were born of applied effort and resilience. Because of his commitments to his studies, many of us might have heard Professor Arthur tell his own story of having to walk from Kayville to Spicetown after missing the last bus home on some nights. It is a narrative which I hope will be inspirational to generations yet unborn who visit this campus and hear the story of Owen Seymour Arthur. But why do we perpetuate his memory with the renaming of this particular building? The answer is simple. Many will know it as the last place where he held a professional post after the University of the West Indies bestowed upon him the title Professor of Practice in the field of the economics of development for his substantial body of work and vast experience in development policy and economic analysis. It was not a paid position, and in fact, Professor Arthur instead paid us back. He enriched Kayville instead. While we provided him with an office which he occupied in a corner section of the top floor of the building behind me, his presence was felt all over the campus. He paid us with his generous and unstinting involvement in public lectures, seminars, and providing advice to graduate students and faculty alike. In that office, he prepared many of his latest public addresses and in-depth economic analyses. He sat in that block of offices in the midst of several entities which focus on regional research, building better trade policy, generating social and economic knowledge, and constantly debating ideas with fellow researchers on matters Caribbean. His work and campus location providing yet another linkage between the academy and Professor Arthur. He held a passion for research and a love of regionalism, which all who knew him regarded as hallmarks of both his professional and public life. In his deep and abiding respect for Caribbean regionalism, Mr. Arthur held an unmistakable special regard for the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, no doubt fostered by Barbados's geographic proximity and economic reliance on this subgrouping. His political contemporaries shared that he would often ensure that Barbados's financial contribution to regional organizations were made well in advance of the time that they fell due, thus enabling these institutions some breathing space to conduct their affairs. Stories are told about him spending weeks and even months researching some areas while preparing to write particular speeches. He once told me that before he wrote anything, he read for at least 2 weeks. The thoroughness with which he brought to preparation paid dividends in the quality of his analysis and insights. It was a characteristic deeply admired by many who worked with him. Others whom he taught in a course called Caribbean Economic Problems during his years as an assistant lecturer here at Kayville have similar recollections of his diligence. Some of those students who had no prior or formal grounding in economics spoke not only of his passion for the subject, but the ease and willingness with which he imparted knowledge, providing them with a firm grasp and understanding and appreciation of matters which they had previously no affinity. It is often felt that were he not pulled into politics, a career in academia was his for the taking. Ladies and gentlemen, the UWI Kayville campus will forever be grateful to Professor Arthur for generously gifting over 30 acres of land at the Lazaretto that enabled the campus to expand. And I'm sure when our Vice Chancellor speaks, you will hear more of this from him. That gift allowed graduate students to have their own space and sport at Kayville its own state-of-the-art stadium. Throughout his years as Prime Minister, the university could always count on Professor Arthur. He was a true friend of this campus, which he fervently wished to see positioned at the center, a hub of a university town that would stretch for miles around. One of Professor Arthur's last major acts of generosity to the University of the West Indies occurred when he gifted his very valuable collection of well-documented papers to this campus. Again, his meticulous nature was evident as he himself took great care to ensure that they were properly indexed for ease of access and perusal. The Owen Arthur papers are a welcome addition to a fast-growing special collection at the Kayville campus, which is also the custodian of papers which belong to several other prominent former regional leaders, such as Dame Eugenia Charles of Dominica, our own Dame Nita Barrow, first woman Governor General of Barbados, and many other things, Maurice Bishop of Grenada, and the Right Excellent, His Excellency, the Right Excellent Errol Walton Barrow. The Kayville campus is dedicated to bolstering its growing collection of cabinet and parliamentary papers of Barbadian and Eastern Caribbean prime ministers. And I'm pleased to report that former Prime Minister of Barbados, Mr. Frundle Stewart, has accepted our request to make his papers available to our collection. And I await the response of the estate of our former Prime Minister, Tom Adams, the Right Honorable Tom Adams, to do the same. And I do believe that whenever that time comes, the first woman to be the Prime Minister of Barbados, the Right Honorable Mia Amor Motley, and I hope she sees how my hands are positioned, would gift her papers to the Kayville campus, and we thank her way in advance for this. Join me in thanking her. These contributions will enable the Kayville campus to become a world-renowned repository of research materials for all who wish to study the political and economic development of Barbados and the Eastern Caribbean. Ladies and gentlemen, this campus continues to do sterling work in sustainable development and wishes to position itself as a center of excellence in relation to the green economy, thus demonstrating how we continue to support Professor Arthur's vision through our work. And we are very pleased that our own Deputy Principal, Professor Winston Moore, is a leading proponent of this. For while the former Prime Minister is renowned for his contributions to economic policy and regional integration, one of his most significant achievements that often goes unheralded was his support for and innovations in relation to the green economy. Former Minister of Energy and Environment and now Ambassador Elizabeth Thompson captures this path-breaking work of our former Prime Minister Arthur in her article entitled Breaking New Ground. In this article, she noted that in March 2007, the Right Honorable Owen Arthur presented a comprehensive national green economy policy for Barbados that was, and I quote, designed to integrate green principles into national economic planning, marrying economic growth with environmental management and preservation, end of quote. It took the international community 5 years, encapsulated in the Rio Plus 20 outcome document, to recognize the value of the green economy as one of the important tools available for achieving sustainable development. The UWI has continued to honor the former Prime Minister's vision of a green economy over the years. The campus authored a green economy scoping study for Barbados in 2014, and we have been making attempts to practice what we preach by greening many aspects of the campus. We have incorporated photovoltaic systems on most of our teaching complexes, and I'm very proud to note that the campus's main administrative building, the Hillary MacDonald Beckles Administration Complex, which will be the first smart green building at the UWI Kayville campus. And we opened this building last year in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, and I'm charging my successor, who I recognize, and I hadn't seen him earlier, Professor Clive Landis, a principal designate, welcome, to do the right thing and honor the naming of that building with a nice, dignified ceremony, because we could not do it in May last year. Ladies and gentlemen, I have briefly mapped the interconnectedness between this campus and the man whose name will forever be linked to it through its prominent placement on the building that stands in front of you and behind me. As a regional entity, this university can think of no more fitting symbol of regional unity than to formally connect the memory of someone who breathed regionalism to one of the premier places on campus where researchers dedicate themselves to furthering the quest for regional unity. May the passion of Professor Arthur forever inspire our work, enlighten our journey, and fuel our aspiration to build an unwavering Caribbean unity. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you.
Thank you very much, Principal. You know, as an economist, I don't get the opportunity to save anyone's life very regularly, but I think I can do that this morning. Security has just informed me that someone's wedding band has been found outside. So if you do want to make it home safely and you know, enter the house, I would advise you to go to security and pick up your wedding band. And now I think I should deserve an award for that or something like that. Ladies and gentlemen, the next speaker is very closely linked to the Right Honorable Owen Arthur, as he would have led the Kayville campus as principal during the time when Professor Arthur was Prime Minister. And they both shared a common vision of transforming and expanding tertiary education in Barbados. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to introduce Professor Sir Hilary Beckles, Vice Chancellor of the University of the West Indies, University of the West Indies.
Thank you, Chairman, Professor Moore. Our distinguished Prime Minister, the Honorable Mayor Motley, Sir Paul Altman, the Chairman of the Campus Council, Professor Barito, Principal, Professor Landis, Principal-elect, Minister Jordan and other members of Parliament and other representatives of government, Mrs. Julie Arthur, Leah, and all of the Arthur family, my distinguished colleagues, members of the media, very good morning, everyone. This is undoubtedly a very special day. Those of you who are deeply embedded in the spiritual realm would know that these showers are here for a reason. This is a day in which our university expresses gratitude while simultaneously celebrating one of our most distinguished alumni. He has been a great friend of the UWI. It is also a very special day because our distinguished Prime Minister and friend, Mama Mia, is here. She is here in the House, and she intends to speak. So this morning, we are all going with Owen. I will make presentations from the perspective of one who shared the same undergraduate experience as Prime Minister Arthur. We both did our first degrees in economics and history. I have a perspective from the northern peasantry of Barbados and from the perspective of being the principal at Cave Hill during his tenure, and as an academic historian who understands his vision. I should begin by saying that in 1994, in the general election, in that election, I was not going with Owen. I was siding with Sandy because it was an IMF thing. And in those days, the IMF had a very demonic attitude towards the Caribbean. And I found myself, having lived in Jamaica 10 years prior, and seeing how the IMF had devastated the Jamaican poor, I was fearful of Barbados. But that disagreement became the basis of many personal conversations, and in the end, those conversations were the basis of our friendship and our trust. He respected my position, and I respected his vision for our country. When I returned home in 2002 to be the principal of the Cave Hill campus, he sent for me. And the language he would always use was young Beckles, because he was my senior at Coleridge and Parry. And therefore, he had every right to see me as young Beckles. That was the respect that existed within the school community. And he said to me, I want you to go and meet with Mayor. I want the two of you to plan out a vision for CAFL campus and for the university in Barbados on the whole. That was the beginning of my professional journey with Mayor. She organized a workshop, and I presented my views as to where CAFL should go in the next 10 years. It was in that workshop, organized by the Minister of Education, Mayor Motley, that led us in some deep intellectual conversations about higher education and development to emerge with the vision for the CAFL campus, which became popular in our country, that the role of the CAFL campus is to produce at least one graduate in every household on this island as part of a human resource revolution, as part of an anti-poverty strategy, as a part of growing the middle class. And may I wish to thank you for that, because you are the co-author of that. And I can tell you a very emotional experience I had driving along the highway and listening to a radio program, a call-in program. And the lady called in and said, Mr. Moderator, I have 3 picnic. The father does not give them no support, but the children are bright. And you don't hear, the professor has a place at CAFL for my 3 children. I pulled off and cried, because the vision had been communicated that we were going to uplift all Barbadians. There were some 120,000 households, I thought at the time, and we were looking at every household to come into the CAFL to build their future. Prime Minister Arthur signed off. He signed off. And he said, I will work with CAFL on the budgetary provisions to enable this to happen. And I said to Prime Minister Arthur, let us shake hands and make a deal. Prime Minister Arthur, you pay the tuitions for the students, and you leave the capital to me. I will find the capital to put up all of these buildings. But you pay the student fees, and we are on our way. And that is precisely what he did. He paid the fees. CAFL campus at the time had 3,000 students. And it had been capped. It had been capped at 3,000 for over 2 decades. And Prime Minister said, how can you cap the Faculty of Social Science when that is the faculty that has programs in tourism and financial management, contract development, generic management, all of the areas on which the Barbados economy rests. That faculty was a faculty producing the resources to grow the economy, financial management, tourism, all of those issues. He said, uncap it and give the country the resources to drive forward in those areas. And it was brilliant visionary on his part, because for decades CAFL had no unemployed students, graduates. As our graduates came out of UE, they found jobs because those were the areas where the economy was growing. He was very unhappy with the image of Cave Hill as the backwater of UWI. He, of course, has studied at Mona and had taught at Mona and was part of the magnificence of the Mona campus. He didn't like the idea that Cave Hill was out in the margins of the UWI. And he admonished me to bring Cave Hill to the center of the UWI. Cave Hill must be wanting for nothing. Cave Hill must be as good, if not better, than any campus in the UWI. And it gave me tremendous pleasure later on when Cave Hill was benchmarked and Cave Hill had reached par with its sister campuses, and in some areas had superseded them. We thank Prime Minister Arthur for that vision that enabled Cave Hill to move from 3,000 students to 10,000 students. We had developed a model for that 10,000. The Cave Hill model under his leadership was very clear. Of the 10,000, and that was where it was going to be capped, we agreed that we will cap the Cave Hill campus at 10,000. It will go no further. That is the maximum carrying capacity of the Cave Hill campus. 7,000 must be Bajan. 2,000 must be regional from all the other islands, because he was insisting that Cave Hill should be a regional campus, bringing people from all over the Caribbean. The Jamaicans will come to do law, the Trinis will come to do tourism, and we had this vision. And 1,000 from beyond the Caribbean, North America, Europe, Africa, and elsewhere, and that was the model. But I respected him also for the brilliance of his relationship to the campus. I do not believe that any principal of any campus, Eugene, you might be having that now with Prime Minister Motley. But at the time, no principal enjoyed the relationship which I had with Owen Arthur. He will call and he will say to me, "Young Beckles, we are projecting 4% growth in the economy next year. I want you to bring your initiatives, bring some Cave Hill initiatives, because Cave Hill must benefit from the growth." And we will go down with the initiatives. Another time he will call and he will say, "Young Beckles, I'm expecting contraction. I'm expecting some contraction in the economy. Hold off on everything. Hold off. Cut back." And we would hold off and cut back. And so we had this relationship, growth, stability, growth, and he matched the growth of Cave Hill with the growth of the Barbados economy. And he measured that scientifically. It was not meant to be happenstance. When the economy grew, the campus would benefit. When the economy contracted, the campus would do likewise, and we would ban our belly. And that was the model that we used to grow this campus. Then, as you have heard from the principal, he vested a significant amount of land to the campus for its future development. Now, there is a story about the Lazaretto lands I must share, but I'm going to share discreetly. My distinguished predecessor, Sir Keith, had written to the government asking for permission to use the Lazaretto lands. We have a letter on file in which the response came, "The land is valued at so many $1 million. Do you have the money to buy it?" The land is valued at so many million. Do you have the resources to purchase? I shared that with Prime Minister. He said, because the land is yours. No, it's yours. I have already sent a notice to the Ministry of Housing to make arrangements. That is how he saw this campus. In fact, the policy paper which he wrote said all government lands within a mile of this campus is subject to vesting in the university. And thus the vesting began in different pieces of land. And so under his tenure as Prime Minister, the physical size of Cave Hill doubled, the number of structures doubled, the student numbers tripled, and the budget increased by 40%. The Cave Hill campus emerged in its modern manifestation out of his commitment and his vision. Even the 3Ws Oval that you see here, the World Cup was coming to the Caribbean in 2007. I went to him and I said, if the World Cup is coming to the Caribbean, the UE must get piece of the action. We have to get piece of the action. You cannot bring all of these teams into Barbados and the university don't get piece of the action. And he agreed. And we started the conception and the design of the 3Ws Oval. And I remember a letter he wrote to the chairman of the ICC, Mr. Dalimar, in India, laying the foundation for a conversation with Mr. Dalimar. And I spoke with him in New Delhi. I went to New Delhi. And I said, well, the father of West Indies cricket, Sir Frank Worrell, is lying here. Sir Frank Worrell laid out this cricket field. He designed this cricket field. Because as you know, at the time when the campus was built, the land which is currently occupied by Queen's College, that was where the playing fields of Cave Hill were meant to be, at the site of Queen's College. And it was Sir Frank Worrell who said, no, you have to build the field and build the campus around the field so that physical education and intellectual education should go hand in glove in a model. So, Sir Frank Worrell was commissioned to lay it out and to design it. And when Mr. Dalimar heard that we had the mortal remains of Sir Frank here, and we were going to honor the 3Ws, the ICC made arrangements for us to go forward with the 3Ws Oval. And all of the major teams in the world, Australia, South Africa, England, New Zealand, India, all played cricket here at the World Cup. We became the first university in the world to host World Cup anything. We thank Owen Arthur. And so, when he had demitted office, we made arrangements to give him these facilities. If you can see the building in front of you, you can see in the top left-hand corner, the only part of that building that has a balcony is Owen Arthur's office. We redesigned that building to make sure that Prime Minister had a balcony where he could look out onto the campus and look beyond. And we thought that this was the right thing to do. This was the decent thing to do. This was the honorable thing to do. Because our philosophy had always been that a university must not only be excellent, a university must be ethical. It must be ethical in its conduct. Gratitude. Gratitude. And he enjoyed these buildings. It saddened me that in a subsequent parliamentary conversation, a member of government was able to stand in Parliament and say that Beckles and them are harboring Onatha up there. Harboring. I have only seen the word harboring used in Barbadian language and history in the slave laws. In the slave laws, where any person who was found harboring a runaway would be imprisoned, whipped, or have an arm detached. Harboring. But we were proud that as his alma mater, we were not going to betray his trust and his confidence. We waited until the protocol was appropriate. We met with our distinguished Prime Minister, Mayor Motley, and we worked through the protocol, through the various committees of the campus, through the various committees of the university, because in our university we have something called a naming committee. It's a university-wide committee made up of people from all the campuses, and you have to present the case to that naming committee. So after it has gone through the campus committees, it goes to the UE-wide naming committee, and there has to be agreement by the entire university. We receive unanimous support from the entire UWI to name this building in honor of the late Onatha. We are blessed this morning. We are blessed that our Prime Minister has passed this baton to support higher education to our current Prime Minister, Honorable Mayor Motley. She has picked up this baton. She has restored confidence in this university. She has restored the budgetary sustainability of this campus, and she has given poor Barbadian children once again something that was taken from them, an opportunity to lift themselves and their family with a higher education. Prime Minister, we thank you. We are grateful to you, Prime Minister. We celebrate your leadership. We celebrate the conversations you have had with the university. We celebrate the interventions you have made to put us back on track. And we do this within the context of this honoring. When we look at the university, when I reflect upon the university, I reflect upon those conversations, Prime Minister, of 20 years ago, when you as the Education Minister and we sat down in that workshop under the Prime Minister's patronage to plan for this moment, for this day. I wish to thank you, Prime Minister. I wish to celebrate the Arthur family. I wish to celebrate this legacy of a young man who came from the peasantry of the North, who became a student on this CAFL campus, who became a lecturer in the UWI, who became a distinguished Prime Minister, and who became a distinguished professor within this University of the West Indies. It is indeed a blessed day. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vice Chancellor. Ladies and gentlemen, our next speaker would have served within the former Prime Minister's cabinet, holding several portfolios. I'm very proud to introduce our champion of small states on the international stage, very much in the tradition of great Caribbean leaders, the Honorable Mia Amor-Motley, Prime Minister of Barbados, to deliver her remarks.
Thank you very much. How are you, David? I look at the watch to make sure I can say good morning. Good morning, distinguished guests, distinguished leadership of this Cave Hill campus and of the University of the West Indies, distinguished members of the Arthur family, distinguished guests, all. I sat here this morning listening and reflecting how much this moment captures for me memories. But the memories settle around one word, and the word is bridge. Bridge. I didn't attend the Cave Hill campus, but at every stage of my life, the Cave Hill campus became critical to what I was doing. As a young student at Queen's College, the Cave Hill campus was the place that we came to do the summer school to prepare us for CXC exams. And it was hence on this location that I first had the opportunity to meet with students from all backgrounds, with all types of abilities, with all types of interests, to allow me an experience that was broader than that to which I would have been exposed solely within the confines of Queen's College. Little did I know that that would then be followed by the opportunity ushered in, ironically, by Errol Barrow to come with him on a few occasions to this campus, particularly when Michael Manley was visiting and speaking and laying out for us his perspective on what small states were facing and what he was fashioning with the new international economic order, and pretty much reflecting in his scholarship through his wonderful writings from the politics of change to up the down escalator, or down the up escalator, sorry. But that was all peripheral and before becoming an adult. My first real opportunity to be on this campus regularly, and I can now confess to the bursar and the registrar, was at the instance of the man who we celebrate today, who insisted that in spite of the fact that I was not registered to be a student at this campus or in this university, that I attend his classes, which I did for a good 3 months without the benefit of having to do the other things that would normally be associated with attendance at a university. And I reflected on it because it was born out of a passion for Caribbean development, a passion for Barbadian development, a passion for knowledge, a passion for service. And it was that bridge that he carried me along, starting first and foremost, not in our work as members of Parliament or members of the Labour Party, but it started first in the pursuit of scholarship and the pursuit of knowledge. And for me, that has always been the bridge that has defined our contribution to public life, because it was intended always to be rooted in how we could settle policy that will allow people to sleep easier each night and allow people to grow each day. As simple as that. There were many routes to get there. There were many things we had to build. But if you don't understand the rudiments of what you're doing, you could end up anywhere and doing anything. And that was the first lesson that I learned from Owen Arthur. The pursuit of excellence and the commitment to task until completion. Now, I could stand here and talk about many things, but I have come to the point, as I have been in public life now for over 32 years, to recognize the absolute critical element for success. And success starts with that commitment to task and that dedication to excellence. It is not only something to be spoken about at high levels, but it is an attitude and an ethic that is required at every level of this society, irrespective of the task that is being performed. And whether it is a fisherman fishing, whether it is a professor or a lecturer preparing to teach, whether it is a public servant issuing licenses, whether it is a cabinet reflecting on how we transform and shape a society, the ethic remains the same. And I therefore this morning want to celebrate the life of Owen Arthur as we commemorate his name in perpetuity through the naming of this building, by reflecting on those commitments to task and duty and to excellence that were forced to become a habit in all that we did in the settlement and execution of public policy in this country. I'm conscious that he too benefited from that same approach from a previous leader as well. His name was Tom Adams. And Owen would sit and regale us, as he very often did, with the stories. And if you heard it once, you would probably have heard it 10 times. Because he was a raconteur. He was a storyteller. And he would tell us the stories of what Tom would do with him to prepare him for this journey and this commitment of public policy, and the commitment to excellence and to task. The word bridge comes back because we are all bridges for those that come and who must carry with them those same ethics that we hope will define their success as much as it shapes our success. But it is the inspiration not just there. When Owen asked me to be Minister of Education, it was with the clear understanding that one of the first tasks that we would face would be the settlement of the difficulties being faced with the provision of tertiary education in this country. There was a loan from the World Bank, and the condition on that loan was the implementation of fees for students attending the University of the West Indies, the Barbados Community College, and the Samuel Jackman Prescott Polytechnic as it then was. The loan was for $15 million US. It was the last regular loan from the World Bank that the government of Barbados ever had before we then were graduated. And in fact, the loan that we received 2 weeks ago is only the second such loan that we have received under exceptional access in the last 30 years from the World Bank. We took a decision as a cabinet, led strongly by the Prime Minister, as he then was, that we could in no way agree to remove the ladder for success that was necessary to move people out of poverty in this nation through the provision of tertiary education, whether at the Cave Hill campus, at the community college, or at the Polytechnic. It meant my having to speak to the World Bank and to negotiate, and quite frankly, it ended up being one of the easiest tasks that I ever undertook as Minister of Education, because the bank was adamant that it was not they who insisted on that commitment, but that it was the then government who committed to that as one of their commitments when given the choice to determine what were the conditionalities from a policy perspective that you would put in place. That was offered up. It then led, therefore, to the reversal of that decision and the establishment of the Leonard Shorey-chaired committee on the issue of the provision or the setting of fees for tuition at UWI. I'm sharing this morning because I realize that in our modern history, too little is written and too little is captured. And I hope and pray that part and parcel of all that we are doing will be to change that trajectory where so little is recorded of the public affairs of this nation. I can say to you that your current principal clearly was not only therefore walking by faith just now when she put her hands so, but also an element of sight, because she knows that I would not know how to tell her no with respect to my own papers. And if only, and men please excuse us, if only as a matter of gender courtesy for the role that she has played in being able to secure and settle the right of Caribbean women to be recognized, celebrated, and given opportunity to build out this region, I say yes to you, Madam Principal. But going back to the point, Dr. Shorey's committee eventually reported and recommended that the government of Barbados should pay 50% of the tuition fees of the students, and the student should pay 50%. I agonized as Minister of Education on this for weeks. There was no doubt that we were recovering from the difficulties of the early 1990s, and the economy had not yet settled. And I went to OWEN and I said, Skipper, this is what Dr. Shorey has reported. But I must tell you that it does not sit well with my gut. And I really, really don't want to be the Minister of Education that will have to tell people that they've got to pay 50% fees. I do not want to be associated with that. And he said to me, and I don't want to be the Prime Minister associated with it too. And he did his shoulders in the way that we all know that he would do his shoulders when he told me that. And the rest was history. We went to Cabinet, and the Cabinet agreed that the government of Barbados would order its affairs on the principle of shared responsibility and shared burden, with the understanding that the prosperity must equally be shared when the time comes. I've told you this because this is the bridge that I crossed over to reach to 2018, to make the decision for the second time This time now, taking his position, because it was now for me and Santia to be able to say, reverse it, and let us ensure that the one pathway that the people who live on this 166 square miles have to being able to make the best of themselves and to transform not just themselves, but the family from which they come, that must never be blocked, and that it must become part and parcel of the essence of who we are as a nation, that we accept the responsibility towards each other. And I've always said that a country that has even in the worst times of its history, Sir Hilary, even in the worst times of our history, this country has had a commitment to education, having 200 primary schools on 166 square miles in the year 1900, having 6 secondary schools in the year 1900, having the Codrington College play the role as it did affiliated to Durham University with the ability to provide a degree on 166 square miles on an island nestled between the Atlantic Ocean and the Caribbean Sea in the year 1900. And there's no doubt that there were many horrific and horrendous aspects of our early settlement that may and should be appropriately be contextualized now as we deal with the issue of reparations. But equally, there were a few things that have allowed us to benefit in terms of institutional development, and the institutional framework for education was one of those things. It may well be that it was used as a tool of containment in the same way that some argue that the religion was at the same time. And it may well be that that is why we have a greater responsibility to change the nature and structure of our educational system from primary to tertiary, to allow it to be an unleashing mechanism as opposed to a mechanism of containment that has been the architecture settled upon by the colonizers of our nation. But Owen understood it, and he allowed us, therefore, the freedom to be able to pursue it. And hence, the bridge that we traveled allowed this government, which I have the honor to lead, to make a very quick and easy decision within a matter of days that would have restored the integrity to the University of the West Indies finances at Cave Hill by reason of the decisions which we took. And don't get me wrong, it is not easy. And Sir Hilary, in the same way that you would have had conversations with Owen, I have had conversations with Madam Principal when we had to be able to do a little tightening, Lisa would know. But we did it with the capacity to plan and to settle such that your affairs are not disrupted and our expectations are not compromised. And it is against that background that it was my distinct pleasure to complete the process as we are doing with the vesting of the lands, not just at the Lazaretto, but for the benefit of the public of Barbados, for the entire Cave Hill campus, which has never been vested in the University of the West Indies. And you may ask why, but they hear all the time, it doesn't make a difference. Well, it does make a difference. It makes a difference to their balance sheet. It makes a difference to what they can leverage. And it is against that background, Sir Hilary, that I am happy to be part of a process that I've placed before the University Grants Committee that sees us wanting to engage with Caribbean governments not only for the provision of liquidity and cash, but for the capacity to earn on your own. And it is against that background that the government of Barbados will lead from in front. And we have indicated that for the University of the West Indies and for the regional institutions with which we are associated or members of, that the government of Barbados will create this appropriate special purpose vehicles to allow those institutions to share, one, in 5% of the renewable energy commitments of the government of Barbados, so that the university and CARICOM and its institutions on a 50-50 basis, 50% to the UWI and 50% to CARICOM and the other institutions will share in that 5% quota for licenses for the provision of renewable energy in Barbados, for you to have a stream of income and revenue to stabilize you as you go forward. And why? Because if we are going to benefit from the patrimony of this nation, from the wind, from the sun, from the ocean, from even the refuse that we collect, then it is only fair that the institutions that stand, I almost said in loco parentis, but in trust, but there is an element of in loco parentis, for the people of this nation, as custodians of their development, then we have a responsibility to you and to CARICOM and the regional institutions that without which we wouldn't be anywhere today. Look at CARFA, playing the critical role ensuring that Caribbean states be able to deal with this awful pandemic. Look at the RSS, ensuring daily that they're moving samples up and down so that especially those countries in the Eastern Caribbean can manage their public health affairs and the individual health and well-being of their citizens by reason of these institutions. But it isn't only there that we stop. We have said as a government in the University Grants Committee that if we can get every other member of the Caribbean community to issue such licenses constituting 5% of their renewable energy commitments to University of the West Indies and to CARICOM for you to monetize, then we will go a long way in stabilizing the financial security of these institutions which are so critical for our prosperity as a nation, as nation states. And I went one step further, that we need equally to recognize that it is the university that has been at the forefront of much of the research in the area of medicinal cannabis. Here in Barbados, in Jamaica, elsewhere in the region, and therefore it is only appropriate as well that a similar licensing regime be afforded to the university and to CARICOM for the benefit to be able to monetize in the same way as we are doing with the renewable energy licenses. And you may ask once again why. In the first term of Owen Arthur as Prime Minister and myself, as we wrestled upon the difficult issues of the funding for the university, having taken the decision to pay the fees and having taken the decision that we were going to stand by the university, we both went to Jamaica, where Owen delivered a seminal lecture that I hope the university can find, reflecting on the need to move the university from its excessive reliance on government financing within the region to a standard of 60% reliance and 40% coming from either revenue from other streams or business activity with which the university, and in particular intellectual property, with which the university could settle and move forward. And that has remained the philosophy of the Barbados government with respect to the provision of educational services in this country. But I want to go one step further this morning and to share with you what we must do. This pandemic has been horrific, not just on the lives of our citizens, but for me more than anything else, on the impact that it has had on our children and our young people. with respect to their education and with respect to the opportunities that can flow therefrom. There is no doubt that we are going to have to deal with the digital divide. And there is no doubt that we need to do so collectively by ensuring that we treat to the provision of devices for our children in a way that is sustainable, in the same way that we did for textbooks and the provision of textbooks in secondary schools in this country. We take it for granted, you know. There are so many other countries where children do not have access to materials. Sometimes they don't even have access to the facilities appropriately necessary for them to learn. But we have to commit not only to the reform of the purpose of education and the content of education, but the modalities used to teach within our system. And it is to that extent, therefore, that I believe that we will be successful if we can find a collective mechanism, because we are simply too small to be a price setter and become a victim of the prices, and hence the capacity to undermine the quality of education that can be delivered in a digital environment. We are now seeking to work with the telecommunications companies of the region, as well as other individual governments and persons outside of the region, to ensure that we can provide access to our children on an affordable basis for the governments that will allow us to treat to a kind of model scheme, just as we did with the textbook loan fund, where people have access to those things and where they help us carry the burden as they have done with the textbooks. In addition to that, however, those who have had to leave this august institution, many of them have had to do so in the last year without the assurance of opportunities and jobs because of the general economic decline within the region. And what we must not allow to happen is to allow our best to flounder and to literally find themselves at a difficult point in determining whether it is this region that they will build, or whether, like those who had to go before, they will go outside of this region in order to sustain themselves. My government is about to take a proposal for something called the Future Barbados Framework, Future Catapult, where we will use Future Barbados as the Barbados government's moonshot factory, where we will look to work with the young people produced by this institution and other institutions in this country over the course of the next few years, but in particular with the first phase between now and March next year, to help us settle on some goals that we would like to have by 2026, within 5 years. That we want to earn for the government of Barbados at least $100 million in value through either new revenue or cost savings. That we want to reduce by at least 50% the prevalence of 5 major social problems as identified by ourselves, but consistent with United Nations SDGs framework. That we would want that there be at least the creation of 2,000 new jobs against the context of this Future Barbados framework, not for the entire economy, because we will create jobs separate from this initiative for those who can't parse language. That we will also seek to use this opportunity to elevate Barbados to the top 10% ranking on the Youth Development Index, the SDG goals, and the ranking, and also the Social Mobility Index. And that finally, Barbados must be recognized as an innovation, as a hub, for social innovation. And what are those 5 things that we feel will capture the imagination of our nation, while at the same time capturing the passion and commitment to task that we want from the students who have come through this university and other institutions in our land. Future health, the designing of a roadmap that will see us reduce childhood obesity by 50%, at least 50% by 2026. It is a problem that is marring too many of our families, scarring too many of our families, inhibiting what they can achieve, because we all know that childhood obesity leads to too many other difficulties with chronic NCDs. 2, that we develop systems, strategies, and campaigns to reduce plastic pollution, carbon emissions, and waste production. Well, yesterday I set out what Barbados's nationally determined conditions are as we play our role as one of the nation states of this world that recognizes that if we do not change what we do and how we do it, that within 11 years, the 1.5 to survive will be nothing but a fleeting illusion, in the words of Bob Marley. 3, that we will seek, through the use of digital technologies, to reduce youth unemployment by 50% by 2026. 4th, that we will use in our educational system, formally and non-formal education, to ensure that every Barbadian student and every Barbadian who, not being a student, like me, who wants to learn a second language can do so by 2026. And that finally, that we also develop these partnership systems, curriculum, and technologies simply to reduce crime and to reduce violence in our landscape, whether that be verbal or physical. I've set out these 5 objectives within the context of Future Barbados, and I've chosen to share it with you this morning ahead of going to Cabinet, because in a very real sense, the passion for this moment has come as a result of the bridge that I have walked upon, that Owen Arthur and others laid for us. And I trust and pray that this Future Barbados framework will be such a bridge, Leah, for you and Isabella. Don't get tapped, I went to Isabella. But I want the generation point. Because you will be the generation that must take up from where we have left off to make sure that not just the opportunities, but the commitment to task and the pursuit of excellence shall be always there with you as you seek to solve the intransigent problems that are being placed before us. As a student of history, Sir Hilary, you more than most will recognize that if you do not know your history, you cannot get through this moment in the 21st century. For in so many ways, it reflects the mood, the attitude, the battles of a century ago in different formats, but it is still the same characters, the same motivations, the same unconscious bias, and the same battles just being thrown at us in a different way. And if we don't stay together as a people and as a region, then that which successfully allowed us to be the subject of exploitation will happen again. I end on this last point, and it is one that was dear to Owen's heart as well. For his work on small states was equally the bridge on which I walk today to lift up small states. I leave you to go and have discussions on how we treat to the global minimum corporate tax rate that we know that a country of 166 square miles cannot stop a world that is committed in that direction. But we equally know that a world that is rooted in fairness and transparency ought never to exclude the perspective or comments of those that are most vulnerable among its global community, particularly when it is simply to ask for clarification and to ask for the framework and the time frame within which matters that can affect as much as 13% of our revenue will have to be crafted. We accept that the world will go where it wants to go, but we equally accept that the world cannot so disrupt the organization and functioning of nation states without so much as a conversation and without so much as the provision of details, that to do so would be horrific and destabilizing as we fight other major existential crises such as climate and such as the pandemic against the background of vaccine inequity. Owen Arthur had to fight a similar battle. It was not then against the entire global community, and it was the first shot at the determination that sovereign parliaments would no longer have the total freedom to settle their tax policy. And this is so fundamentally different from the governance structures which hold our societies together that we have to ask for a moment to pause and to have serious discussions on these matters, because these countries that have participated in the international financial services arena were encouraged so to do by the very same countries that now want to shut it down. We have no difficulty in being a global citizen, but the ethos that Owen left us with is the same ethos that we proceed today now on. And that is why I say that as a keen student of history, the more things change, the more they remain the same. I want to salute the university for this moment. You know that I would have liked more. I said so. I also hope that this country will learn from my own example and our own example, Owen and my own. If ever there was a human being that I knew, like myself, who could remain focused on task, irrespective of the other distractions or the other balls outside the off stump, it was Owen Arthur. And that was largely because we understood a commitment to the higher purpose of nation building at all costs. I hope that this Cave Hill campus will imbue such a commitment in its students, but also in the wider Barbadian community from which your relationship and validity as a university also exists, not just for the academics who come here, but for your role in building out the Barbadian national fabric. I thank you for this honor to a former Prime Minister of this nation, and I thank you for your commitment to ensuring that not just in the collection of his papers, but also in the work that you are doing across all sectors, lines, genders, separations, parties, that you continue to do so, because there must always be a place to which Barbadians can go to remind them in a tangible framework, whether through papers or audiovisual material, of who we are. Because this nation is a proud nation, but we will only make the advances if we do not repeat the mistakes of the past. And that collection of papers and that commitment to tell the story of this nation is the strongest weapon in our arsenal not to repeat the mistakes of the past. Thank you, and God bless.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. Now, there's one group of individuals here this morning that we have to say thank you very much to. We want to say thank you very much to the family of Professor Arthur for first sharing him with Barbados, and secondly, sharing him with the University of the West Indies. I was the head of the Department of Economics when he was named Professor of Practice, and the late Prime Minister would just relish in speaking to our students in the department. We'll have to tell the students, just give him a little bit, because he can go on the entire night. And that was the type of individual that he was. He just loved speaking to our students. Now, on behalf of Professor Arthur's family, we have a recent first-class honors graduate, Miss Leah Arthur, to provide remarks.
Protocols having been established, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I firstly want to thank Professor Winston Moore for his introduction. I must admit that I have never been formally introduced to speak at any event, but hopefully this is the first of many. It is a great honor to stand before you today, not only as a representative of my family, but to speak on behalf of my late father, Professor the Right Honorable Owen S. Arthur. My father's passion for education and the doors it could open knew no bounds. He was so well versed with an extensive knowledge and vocabulary that could really humble you if you weren't adequately prepared to encounter it. But despite this, he was always ready and willing to learn and understand more. He was always reading, always researching, always asking questions. Even in his last days, he still believed he had more learning and more work to do. And while he was on this constant mission of self-development, he simultaneously strived to ensure that the people around him also had the means to reach their full potential. One could hardly have a conversation with my father without it ending in him suggesting a topic for you to research, a book to read, or if you were fortunate enough, an invitation to our home to peruse his personal library for yourself. From a professional standpoint, this dedication to the betterment of others through education is easily evidenced through the aforementioned vision of having a university graduate in every Barbadian household. On a more personal level, this same commitment was mirrored in the way that he supported Sabrina and I in our education and career goals. We were blessed to have a father who allowed us to choose our own path and encouraged us every step of the way. Unfortunately for him, even though he was always ready and able to assist, much to his disappointment, he raised two extremely independent daughters who very seldom asked for his help. Nonetheless, he still tried to be as hands-on as we would allow him to be and would always insist in trying to help with my work. Many have said that he was using my time at university as his chance to fulfill his dreams of pursuing a law degree. And on one occasion, while writing an essay about Jamaica and their journey towards its sustainable development goals, I did oblige him in assisting me. And honestly, I don't think I ever heard the end of it. And apparently, neither did anyone else. It first started with him showing off to my mother, but clearly he had also told his entire contact list. I say that because months later, we're walking through Sheraton and ran into someone that he knew, and that person could recite my essay title back to me word for word. Now, at the time, I was obviously taken back, but I also understood that this was his way of showing how proud he was of me. It is that sort of commitment that gives you a confidence in your work that I honestly do not think you can get anywhere else. It meant so much to know that even with the 5-hour time difference between England and Barbados, on those late nights when I was struggling to complete my assignments, my father was only a call away if I needed him. Those ideals he constantly preached of going for the gold and facing it and fixing it are principles that Sabrina and I, as his children, had to live by. They are the reason for Sabrina's unmatched work ethic. She has excelled academically, professionally, and in sports as well, with more trophies and awards than I could even begin to count. I don't know anyone more hardworking than my sister. They are also the reason why I was able to graduate with a first-class honors and receive a scholarship from the Honorable Society of the Middle Temple this year. We have always had family in our corner cheering us on. I urge all parents here today to adopt that mentality towards their children's education. This renaming ceremony is an event that my father was thoroughly looking forward to. Anytime we drove down UE Hill, he'd beam when he talked about how his children, grandchildren, and great-grands will be able to pass and remember him and his achievements. He was humbled by this move to honor his hard work. He was proud to have become a professor at the University of the West Indies. This pride stemmed from the fact that he believed it was not just about the education you received, but it was about the way you used your expertise to give back to the people and places that molded you into the person you'd become. This was an attitude that fueled his dedication to St. Peter, to Barbados, and to the wider region. He was a real man of the people. On behalf of my family, I wish to express heartfelt thanks to the University of the West Indies Cave Hill campus for bringing his dream to fruition with this renaming ceremony. I hope that the permanence of his name in such a prominent place serves as a constant reminder to us all to strive for excellence, to defy the odds, and to never forget where you came from. I thank you.
I can see someone plans to take my position very soon. So let's move on to the next part of this ceremony, the unveiling of the plaque. I now invite the principal and Mrs. Julie Arthur, widow of Professor Arthur, to unveil the plaque for this building. I think it's over here. Yeah. Great. Thanks. Now, before we go to the unveiling of the signage, I want to acknowledge the contribution of a number of individuals who have helped with this morning's ceremony. First, the Office of the Principal, the Office of the Campus Registrar, the St. Martin Library, the Office of Marketing and Communications, Campus Security, In Place, Field Tech Station Solutions, and the UWI TV. We'll now have the unveiling of the signage on the CARICOM Research Building. Once again, I invite the principal and members of the Arthur family to assist. But to take you through the next stage of this ceremony, I will pass over to my co-host, Ms. Christiane Walcott, who will provide commentary on the unveiling for both the online audience as well as you here in the tent. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Deputy Principal Professor Winston Moore, for chairing this morning's proceedings. Could we have a hand for the chairman, please? And a very good morning to all gathered with us on this beautiful but rainy Friday morning on the grounds of the CARICOM Research Park here at the University of the West Indies Cave Hill campus, as well as those viewing online through our live UETV broadcast and through CBC TV 8. At this time, a small contingent of the platform party has been invited to make its way from our location to the main entrance of the building, where the official signage will be unveiled. Unfortunately, we seem to have had some technical failure with the screens that are in front of our online audience, but we're hoping that we will get a feed on the screen to your right, so we invite you to view wherever possible. Among the party are the Honourable Mia Moore-Motley, QC MP, Prime Minister of Barbados, the Honourable Colin Jordan, Minister of Labour, Social Partnership Relations and the Third Sector, and also the immediate and incumbent successor to Professor Arthur as the Barbados Labour Party parliamentary representative for the parish of St. Peter. Representing the University of the West Indies are Sir Hilary Beckles, Vice-Chancellor, Sir Paul Altman, Chairman of the Cave Hill Campus Council, Professor the Most Honourable Violet Udine Barito, Pro-Vice Chancellor and Principal, and we've now had the successful undraping of the signage, which reads, the Owen Arthur CARICOM Research Complex, ladies and gentlemen. Also part of the party are Mrs. Julie Arthur, widow of Professor Arthur. She's joined by his children and other family members who are now gathering for a photo opportunity. And this is indeed a proud moment in the life of the Cave Hill campus, and certainly for the departments and personnel who occupy office space within this building. The building is currently home to the Sridath Ramphal Center for International Trade, Law, Policy and Services, the Sir Arthur Lewis Institute of Social and Economic Studies, including its Audine Wilkinson Library, the Caribbean Science Foundation, the Quality Assurance Unit of the UE Open Campus, the Office of the Pro-Vice Chancellor for Undergraduate Studies, and additionally the Cave Hill Campus Credit Union, among other offices. And of course, Professor Arthur's office was located in this building, as we heard from the Vice Chancellor, while he was in residence at the Cave Hill campus as Professor of Practice. So there's a tremendous legacy of research, scholarship, and excellence embodied in this building, and it is only fitting that we bestow upon it this distinguished titular honor. For those of you who are joining us from abroad, the CARICOM Research Complex is prominently situated at the entrance to the CARICOM Research Park in Cave Hill, St. Michael. It is a stately, magnificent building of 4 floors, nestled among several other offices and departments in the wider CARICOM Research Park. We're happy that we've been able to have a brief reprieve in the rains for the ceremony to continue. So, ladies and gentlemen, we present to you once again the Owen Arthur CARICOM Research Complex. For our online viewers who may be unable to see the inscription on the plaque, it reads, "This building was officially renamed in honor of Owen Seymour Arthur in appreciation of his sterling contribution to Caribbean regionalism, economic development, and to the development of the UWI Cave Hill campus." For our UETV audience and our CBC audience, this now brings us to the end of our broadcast. However, before we close the live stream, we take this opportunity to inform you that the University of the West Indies Cave Hill campus continues to honor the outstanding legacy of our former professor of practice and exceptional statesman, the Right Honourable Owen Seymour Arthur. The Sridath Ramphal Centre for International Trade, Law, Policy and Services is pleased to announce the inaugural Distinguished Owen S. Arthur Memorial Lecture on Monday, July 19th at 6 p.m. AST, which is also 6 p.m. Eastern Time or Eastern Caribbean Time. The upcoming lecture will be delivered by the new president of the Caribbean Development Bank, Dr. H. Jean Leon, on the theme, Redesigning Economic Growth Strategies. You're invited to watch it on UETV. To our audience here gathered, as well as our online viewers, we thank you for joining us this morning at the University of the West Indies Cave Hill campus. My name is Christiane Walcott. Goodbye for now.